Given the recent course of events, has this documentary become something different from what it was intended to be?
Certainly it has added more depth into the issue. We were able to articulate our positions on climate change only because of democracy in the Maldives. Without democracy, we wouldn't have been able to come up with that narrative on climate change. And I think also John was able to film us because of democracy. If back in the dictatorship, he would not be even allowed into the country. So I think we wouldn't have this film at all without democracy. And now when the dictatorship is back again after the coup, it is very, very important that the film also has that dimension to it. I think, yes, it's more flavor to the film, it's more depth to it. It gives a better analysis and an understanding on the issues in the Maldives.
Now that you are not the president of the Maldives, how can you make your voice be heard, still be heard?
I think for climate change advocacy, democracy in the Maldives is very, very important. It's going to be very difficult to articulate, it's going to be very difficult to impress upon the public about the Maldives without the democratic structures in the Maldives. So I think it's important that we restore democracy in the Maldives so that the Maldives can again come out with the same moral authority on other issues as well. Yes, as a campaigner I can assist and I can do a part, I can play a part in it. But we need to have a nation behind the climate change activism. And the Maldives is fashioned as a nation that was advocating for climate change. Although I can by myself do it, I think it is very, very important to have a nation that advocates for climate change.
Do you have the sense that the reaction to the documentary by an American audience or a European audience is different?
Yeah, they're miles different. The Europeans have taken into them to believe that climate change is an important issue that has to be dealt right now. European legislations, European public, the manner in which they present the issues and the decisions that they make, their policies they make, are very, very different from the United States. I saw that firsthand in Copenhagen. Europeans were primarily with us, with small nations who were looking for 1.5 degrees and 350 parts per million. Europeans were with us, but the Americans needed more convincing, and they had to do a lot of groundwork before they could join with the European positions. Yes, I think it's very, very different.
Great review in today's New York Times. What is the importance of a great review like the one in such an important newspaper?
If we are to make headway in climate change issues, we have to be able to convince big emitting countries on the dangers and on the difficulties of climate change issues. Now, to convince an American public, you of course need good American reviews, so it's very, very important that New York Times has been able to come up with this review, and the manner in which they see it will have an impact on the wider public, the United States, wider public in the United States. So I think, yes, it is a very helpful review, and I hope that more people will read it, and I hope that more people will watch the film, and not only watch the film, but also understand the issues behind it, and advocate their own governments on climate change issues.
Summarize for me the issues.
We have to be able to find alternative ways of living. Emitting carbon is of course harmful for us, and how can we do away with carbon emission? And to do that, of course, countries need to have an understanding on how much carbon that they will emit for their development and for their living. Now, for an alternative source of energy to come about and for us to be able to economically and viably use them, we have to be able to convince everyone that this is the case. And also carbon emission and global warming doesn't have natural boundaries. You can't cut a deal with Mother Nature. This is physics, this is science, and it's absolute. The science is very sorted. The more carbon that is in the atmosphere, it's going to heat up the universe, heat up the world. And therefore, it doesn't really stop from one country to another. So what you do here in the United States is going to have a huge impact in what happens in the rest of the world. So I feel that bigger emitting countries have to understand that for the planet to survive, they have to be more responsible. They have to find alternative sources of energy. And I believe these alternative sources of energy are available now. Solar, wind, the waves, but we need to work more on it, and we need to start investing on them. The Maldives came up with a carbon neutral plan for us to go carbon neutral in 10 years. We believe that it is possible for us to have a development strategy which is also a carbon neutral, less carbon emitting strategy. Carbon emission doesn't necessarily equate to development. The amount of carbon emission doesn't necessarily equate to a good life. So we must be able to find other development patterns. I think it is possible. Iceland, for example, has been able to develop without fossil fuel, and this is happening in many places. For the Maldives, we had a plan that we can do it in 10 years, and if we can do it, I'm sure everyone else can do it.